Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode number 8 of the You and Jonny Blue podcast. I'm really excited because today I'm talking with somebody who I really respect and I care a lot about. She's been very close to me for a long time, and she's got a really unique perspective that I think will be really important for us to dive into and something that we could all benefit learning a little bit more about, talking more about, and hopefully getting a better understanding of. She's getting her PhD at the University of Utah. She also has 2 kids. Her name's Cheri Blue. Cheri, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's
Yes.
fun to be talking to other people who don't live in my house.
Perfect. This is a great excuse for it. So I'm really glad you decided to join me today because you have 2 kids and
Yep.
you're a working professional.
Yeah.
That is a world that I don't really know much about. And so I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that to get, number one, for myself, a better understanding of what some of the challenges are for parents who are also trying to work right now.
Yeah.
And also for parents who are trying to work, this might be a good way to number one, feel like they're not alone in their struggles, but also I think that you shared with me some really helpful things that they can consider that have been helpful for you. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. But for somebody like me who I have my own struggles right now, but they're different than yours. And one of the things that you mentioned is that you're kind of like your boss, the person who's overseeing your PhD program, the person you report to, doesn't have kids. And you have kind of noticed that there's been kind of a disconnect in her expectations of you, and you kind of feel like she doesn't quite understand where you're coming from. So if we can just make it a little more broad so that maybe people with a boss or maybe people with coworkers who are like me, who don't have kids, how can we sort of relate to one another? How can we support each other if our situations are different?
Well, it's really hard when there's a power differential, because if you are the person who's not in power, you can do your best to explain to your person who's in charge of you and who you're reporting to, like, this is what I'm able to do. If you are someone who is in a position of power where you are supervising people, and you have people reporting to you, I would just say really do your best to think about the position that people are in. And if you don't understand the position that they're in, ask them, talk to them, ask them, what are your days looking like? What are you able to get done? What are the pockets of time that you have? What do you see yourself being able to do? And if you are in a position to be able to extend some grace, to not expect the level of productivity that you were expecting before, I mean, that would be a way to really help some people out right now. I was just talking with a friend of mine who works in marketing, and her boss has said, we expect you to work 40 hours a week no matter what during this time. And she's got 2 young kids at home too. And so that's been very challenging for her as well. But they just said from the outset, like, there's not going to be any flexibility or any changes, which kind of seems unrealistic right now. Everything else has changed. So it seems like the expectations of productivity would change too.
I know it's hard. And that's something that I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of opinions about, but I mean, it's a good point that I could see it, companies need to make money and maybe they're paying salary, but at the same time, just being realistic, I mean, our world is different, and so but that sort of leads into another conversation too, where let's say you as a parent, you're totally aware of your struggles, and you're sort of saying like, man, why doesn't my boss understand what I'm going through? And that's totally fair. But at the same time, like, you or I might not realize what our boss is going through, right?
Yeah, that's totally true.
Our boss might have somebody above them who's browbeating them, saying like, listen, man, you need to increase productivity,
Yes.
or they may have
Well,
a sick parent or something too,
mhm,
right?
yeah. We just don't know the challenges that other people are facing. And so um, I am somebody who subscribes to the work of Brene Brown a lot, and her work has been really helpful to me in my life in all aspects, but it's coming through in this area too, which is that I just I try to make the most generous assumptions that I can. And that doesn't necessarily come out at the beginning. Like, I'm not necessarily able to make the most generous assumption of someone from the outset. And sometimes that's not something that comes naturally. But if I work on it and I employ cognitive processes to help me do that, then I'm able to. And if I'm able to make generous assumptions about somebody's intentions, then I'm able to extend empathy and compassion. And if I'm doing that, then that makes that easier for them to do that for me. Like, for example, today I'm in a situation where things are really shifting with funding for me for my work for next year. And things have kind of been up in the air. Nobody's been able to give me straight answers. It's been a very frustrating situation for me. And so I've been kind of emailing back and forth with my supervisor. And so I had a Zoom meeting with her today, and I was able to talk to her and say, what are the expectations? I don't know if I can get this big paper written by the beginning of June. And can you work with me? I'll do this. Can you do that? And before I went into the meeting, I was feeling really frustrated. I was feeling like nobody was on my team, that I was being miscommunicated with. And then after meeting with her and talking with her, I realized like I'm one little piece of this huge puzzle that she is trying to put together. And she's got all these plates spinning, and she wasn't meaning to neglect me or not communicate with me about my situation. It was just that she was doing the best that she can. She really was, just like I'm doing the best that I can.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Man, that's such a powerful thought, to be generous in the assumptions that we make of other people. But like you said that, and that's really cool that you were able to, through dialogue, figure that out with your boss, right? As you kind of got more information from her,
Yeah.
through dialogue, you realized, whoa, okay, now I have like more of a broad understanding of what's going on. And it helps kind of fill in some of the gaps, right? Like sometimes we don't have enough information, so we just fill in the gaps with the
Yeah.
things that we're worried about or the things that we're insecure about. But
Yeah.
like for you, like if you don't mind using yourself as an example, like what does
Yeah.
it look like to make a generous assumption? Like you said, initially you might, it starts off with you being upset, like at your boss, like she doesn't care about me and like it's so messed up,
Yeah.
or she's
Yeah.
just not treating me well, she's not compassionate. And
Yeah.
what is the process that you found is helpful to go through to eventually arrive at a place where you're making a more generous assumption?
It's like I would first off start by saying that I don't come to the generous assumption right away, usually. I mean, if I'm in a really good headspace and I'm really regulated, then I might. But over the past 3 or 4 days, I've been in this situation that's been really stressful for me, and I have felt a lot of big feelings. um,
Big
that my
feeling.
husband has had to absorb. I've had lots of crying and yelling over here. So you see a very calm and composed person that's come out the other side. But I just want to say that like it isn't like necessarily a sterilized process. I mean, it's not. It's messy. That's the thing is like when we're dealing with our feelings, it can be messy.
Yeah.
But I think like the first thing is that when you're having an interaction with someone and you start having negative feelings, that instead of trying to just stuff those feelings down or walk away from them or just decide I'm not going to feel bad about it, or we do the other thing where we just totally give into those feelings and we just get super mad and we don't really deal with them, but we just like get into it and just get in a bad mood. Like, I think the first thing is to recognize, like, I'm feeling something about this and I want to know why. I want to figure out why I'm feeling it and get to the bottom of it. I think that's the first thing. for me, this is a process that Brene Brown talks about, but she kind of says, she has an SFD. So if you're talking with kids, you might say it's a stormy first draft, or if you're talking with adults, you might call it something else. But it's where you just say the story that your narrative of what you have about this, which for me, it might be with dealing with this thing with my work was my advisor doesn't care about me. She's leaving me out to dry. Like nobody is supporting me. I'm out here all by myself. Nobody cares what happens. And that's the story I was telling myself. And combined with, she thinks I'm lazy. She thinks I'm not working hard enough. Nobody understands where I'm coming from. Nobody understands how hard this has been for me. Right. So that was my first reaction. That's like what is going on in my head. But then the next step is to say, okay, that's the narrative. That's the story that I'm saying. The story I'm telling myself about this situation is nobody cares about me. They think I'm lazy, yada, yada, yada. But then I have to step back and say, what do I objectively know about this situation? The only thing I objectively know is that I don't have this credit. I didn't finish my paper. I didn't get the credit, and I have to get the thing completed by June 1st or whatever. Those are the only things I objectively know. The motives behind all that, I don't know. And
you kind of got like you got a response from your boss that seemed short, or like, or anybody in general, something happens that triggers off this story or whatever. And and it just seems to you in the moment, like, that's messed up. I don't deserve that or whatever. And so, so you kind of like, you start with feeling your feelings, like you said, kind of realizing, I guess this is kind of what I've been feeling, what it seems like to me. But then you sort of examine you
examine what you objectively know, and you separate that from the inferences you're making. Right. Because we can't rely on the inferences, the reading between the lines. We can only rely on objective facts. Right. Okay. And so then if we want to know more, we have to ask questions, and then that's where you say, okay, I'm going to meet with my boss and I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to try to figure this out. And you might even tell your boss, or me, I could have today, I didn't really need to, because once I talked to her, then it became apparent that my first draft was wrong. I didn't even have to ask questions. It just became apparent. But I might say something like, the story I'm making up is that the reason you're not giving me these credits is because you think that I'm not working hard enough and that I'm lazy and that you don't think that I'm going to finish this. And then she could respond to me and she could say, yeah, that's true. And then I'd be, I'd have to be vulnerable, but then I would at least have a starting point to work from. Right. But that wasn't the case today. The case was, what can I do to help you? How can we work on this together? This is how I'm tied up on my end and what I can do. What can you do? How can we figure this out together? And I feel completely different about it.
That's great.
But if I had it taken the next step to say, let's figure this out, then I still would be stewing and saying, she doesn't care about me and I don't even know why I'm in this program.
And not only, it's great that you cleared it up, but you could have also spent 2 or 3 days in a really negative mind space before it was cleared up. Like, it was going to maybe be cleared up one way or the other, right? At some point you figured out, oh, actually my boss, she doesn't hate me, she likes me. But, but that whole time in between, when you're just on the weekend or you're at the park with your kids, and like, you would have been in this space where like, you're really frustrated, angry, you're upset because of what's going on in your head. But like, one of the things that we sometimes realize too, is that when we make generous assumptions about our boss or our coworkers, like sometimes that's not actually true. Right. But it kind of seems like even making that generous assumption helps you to exist in a more peaceful place in the meantime, until you're able to.
Right. Well, it's like the old adage, it's like resentment is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It's like, when you make a generous assumption, or if you're holding back from making a generous assumption because you feel like you just don't want to give that person any grace because you feel wronged, or you feel like they had it coming to them or whatever, it doesn't do anything for them. The only thing it does is it makes you in a headspace and in an emotional and mental space that's unhealthy.
Right.
But by making the generous assumption, regardless of what's actually going on, if you tell yourself, I believe people are doing the best that they can, then that's only going to be helpful to me. I mean, it could be helpful to them too, but ultimately it's a self-serving action. It's a self-serving process.
Yeah. And it can help you to approach the conversation that you have with them in a way that produces a better outcome, right? Because if you go into your boss
Absolutely.
and you're like pissed off and you're like, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna just square things up, like, because
Right.
she knows I work hard, and you go in
Yeah.
there with an attitude that's not in line with reality of how your boss is feeling and what she's thinking, she might become
Mm-hmm.
standoffish too. But what I'm actually curious about now, Cheri,
Yeah.
though, is how, when we're talking about generous assumptions, like, how does that relate to parenting? And how have you found
Yeah.
that, like, making generous assumptions affects the way you interact with your kids right now?
I feel like this is actually the hardest area of my life, the hardest relationships to apply this to, because it's the easiest for me to jump to conclusions about what my kids' intentions are, because I'm their mom. I know what they were meaning. I know what they were trying to do with all this. But in the homeschooling realm, my 7-year-old son, Ansel, he's working every day and doing schoolwork, and he gets tired of it. We've noticed kind of a pattern that like Monday and Tuesday are okay. Wednesday, things start going downhill. Thursday, we're like locking heads, fighting about stuff. He doesn't want to do it. And I just realized like last week, I mean, we've been at this for a long time. I instead of assuming that he's just messing around, he's not being focused, this is all his fault, why is he being such a bad kid, making so many bad choices, like instead of making that assumption and be like, get to work already, I shouldn't have to watch the Zoom video. I just asked him, like, how are you feeling right now? Like, it seems like you're having a hard time doing school. Like, what's going on with you? And he was just saying, like, I just am really tired of this. I'm tired of doing school down in the basement. I really miss my friends. I don't like watching these videos. And it's like, just by asking him that question, I had like new compassion. And so then I was able to say, well, what do you need? What do you need right now to be able to do this? Do you need a break? Do you want to have a dance party? And then he's like, yeah, let's do a dance party. And so we like turned on music and all three of us just kind of danced in the basement. And instead of that turning into a fight, we took like a 3-minute break. He came back to work. He was ready to do it. He felt heard and understood. But if I had, which I have been doing up until this point, so I just want to emphasize, it's not like I'm a model parent. It's like one good time for many, many other bad times where things ended poorly. It just was the difference between me, instead of me just assuming that he wasn't doing his job because he's lazy, he's da-da-da-da-da. I asked him, what is going on? Like, is there another reason why you're having a hard time with this?
Whoa, that's really cool, Cheri. That's really helpful to realize too, right? That like when you go to Starbucks and like the girl seems rude to you, like,
Yeah,
kind of easy to be like, that wasn't good customer service. Like, that's messed up.
yeah,
Like, I'm paying for this. I deserve to be treated
yeah,
nicely or whatever. But then if you find out that the girl's boyfriend just broke up with her or something, then
yeah.
it's, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I get it, man. I'm having a bad day too, or whatever. And then you just
Mm-hmm.
view your interaction with that person in a different way, like through
Yeah,
the lens of compassion, and,
yeah.
but like that all comes about by getting more information usually.
Well, it's like I heard, Dax and Kristen Shepard. Dax Shepard has his podcast, Armchair Expert, and one time he had his wife Kristen Bell on, and he was saying like Kristen just like goes around life just like thinking the best of people all the time, and he's like, it makes me so mad, like because he said we'll be driving down the freeway and some guy will cut me off and I'll get mad and I'll be like, what the heck, man, and I'll get angry about it. And she'll be like, oh, you know what? He probably is on the way to the hospital because one of his loved ones is like an emergent surgery, and that's why he's driving that way. And
Right.
he was just saying she walks through life always thinking the best of it. And he said it used to make him really mad until he realized that she was happy and he was angry all the time.
Right. Exactly. And that's where it kind of comes in, where it's like, even if your generous assumption is wrong, you're happy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's really
Yeah. It's serving you.
right.
Yeah.
So, okay, since your kids are 7 and 5, definitely still challenging and still difficult right now.
Hmm.
But the
Yeah.
challenges maybe that you're having are different from parents with younger kids, like let's say, you know,
Yeah.
3 and
Yeah. Kids in diapers. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I have a friend who I posted on my story on Instagram. It was a repost of some therapist or something who was saying
Hmm.
how, when kids are having tantrums, if you just send them to their room, it sort of teaches them, it conditions them to be like, hey, when I'm showing strong emotion, I get sent away, and so like I
Hmm.
should not do
Hmm.
that, or I shouldn't share my emotions or whatever. And
Yeah.
so it struck me as interesting, and I kind of just reposted it. And he wrote me back and he was like, you know, I have a kid who's throwing tantrums, like, and like he said it really nicely, but basically I don't have any kids, and so it's really easy for me to say that, like, but he was like, dude, sometimes like it's not that I want to teach my kid that, but like I just can't handle somebody screaming in my face anymore. Like I'm
Yeah.
just like almost like, listen, can you just do that somewhere else for just a little bit? Can give me a
Yeah.
break, And
Yeah.
that struck me as like real life, because
Hmm.
that's the reality sometimes. And
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, like, what advice would you have for parents who are like kind of maybe they're in that situation where like, it's hectic. Kids are screaming and crying and they're stuck all day inside with them. They can't take them to childcare. They can't like go to the gym, or they can't like at
Yeah.
least get out of the house even the way that
Yeah.
they used to cope with these challenges.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything that you have, since you have been there with kids that age, that you would help to like advise parents who might be going through that right now?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to quarantine with kiddos that were that little, but um, the truth is offer yourself grace first if you're a parent, whether you're a parent of a teenager or a parent of a 1-year-old. You just have to offer yourself grace. Um,
What does that mean,
it
Cheri?
it means that we all have preconceived notion of what a good parent looks like. Good parents give their kids well-balanced meals, they keep their kids on structured schedules, they limit their screen time, they make sure they have an enriched environment, they're getting exposed to all the things that they're exposed to, and that you don't yell at them, and you manage, like, there's all of these things that you have in your head as the ideal parent. And then life happens, and you don't measure up to your own expectation, and then
Mm,
you just feel bad about yourself. You just feel like, I'm failing myself, I'm failing my kids. And the truth is, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. There is no such thing as it's funny because it's like we were getting ready to do this, and I was texting with you, and I was like, yeah, I'm feeding my kids frozen macaroni and cheese at, I think it was like 8:40 p.m. And they sat in front of the TV before that while I was working, while I was on my computer working. And it's like, I'm not beating myself up about that tonight.
mm,
Like, that is not what I picture as the ideal parenting, situation. Is it the best way to be a parent? Is it that the best thing for them? No, it is definitely not. And is it going to scar them for life? No, it definitely is not. And
mm,
so I think this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. That's how parenting is. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's long trends over time, deliberate choices and consistency over time. But you are not going to run, you're not going to run is it a 100-meter dash in 8 seconds every day of your life. You're just not going to do it. And so you just have to think of it as a long game, and how you, and for quarantine also, like, focus on one thing that you want to do well, and then pat yourself on the back for that one thing, and don't beat yourself about the 99 things you didn't do.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Right. Wow.
Be generous to yourself too. And then also don't compare yourself to other people, especially in the time of quarantine, because we're only seeing what people are posting on social media, which we all know is the highlight reel.
Yeah.
I don't post when my kids are screaming at each other. I post like when they're sitting in the chair hugging each other while my son reads my daughter a book. And those two things both happen. They're both real, but I'm only posting about one of them, you know?
Right. And now especially is when we're only seeing what we see on social media, because that's really all we can see anyway, you know? So
yeah. And it's like, it's the same, I'm the same way, because like I post recipes on my Instagram, and I don't post the nights that I'm microwaving wheels and cheese. I post about the day that I make like the sweet potato kale bowl with the tahini sauce. Like, but I have both things happening in my house. And so comparison is the thief of joy. And focus on the things you're doing well and try to do more of those things, and don't beat yourself up for the things that you're not feeling good about.
okay, well, that's really helpful and really cool. What would you say in terms of, with you and your spouse? I mean, obviously we know there's tons of challenges there that we could talk about for a long time in terms of, learning to communicate and like that type of thing about a lot of issues. But what are some general things that you have found have been helpful for you to kind of like work through challenges together, as opposed to letting the challenges that you're facing versus in your job with your kids, like, so that you guys are being unified there, as opposed to it like driving you guys apart?
Well, I don't know. Every relationship has its own patterns. The pattern in my relationship with my husband is that we got married right before he started medical school, and so he was in this super intense program. 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship. So we had been married for 11 years before he was even out of training. And so during that time, it was I was the caretaker and he was just surviving. But part of that pattern was, and I'm kind of the natural person who just says oh, what's the job that needs to be done? And I do it. But sometimes when I started to feel totally overworked and depleted in my own energy, that I would just start resenting that I was doing everything. And so we kind of got into a cycle over years of things being okay, and then me getting to the point where I was I'm doing everything, and I have a huge explosion. I get mad at him. He's like, whoa, I'm sorry. I just was asking you if we had washed the towels, and I'm telling him and I do this and I do that, and do you even know the things, and one of the huge things to help me break that cycle is that the second that I start to notice, oh, I'm starting to feel a little resentful about that I'm doing all this work, is that I tell him. I'm starting to feel a little taken for granted. I'm starting to feel like nobody notices all the work that I do. And the second thing that I do is when I need help, I ask for help. Which for my personality, there's kind of a pride thing there where I feel there's kind of a self-serving, where I feel higher than thou, I'm so great because I do it all. I'm like a martyr. That's what it is. That's what I'm trying to go. The word I was trying to find is there's kind of a self-righteous indignation of being a martyr, that I'm doing all of this in suffering and silence, and that's not healthy. And so I have to put that aside and say, I'm having a hard time and I need help. And then the other thing is I try to be really intentional about paying attention to the things that my partner is doing. And I try to say thank you whenever I notice him doing things. Every time if I see him emptying the dishwasher, I say thank you. And if I see him changing a load of laundry, I say thank you. Not because I think that's my job and he's doing it for me, so thank you for helping me out. It's just I see that you're seeing the things that we share together and you're just taking initiative and doing it, which means that I don't have to take initiative to do it.
Mm,
And so I don't, on his end, I don't even know if he notices that, but it also helps foster that generosity and goodness. When I say thank you out loud, it helps me remember, oh yeah, I'm not in this alone. We're a partnership. We're doing this together.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and he really is like, tries to see what I'm doing, and he tries to ask me, what do you need? Like, that's kind of a thing that we're both doing together, is I'm trying to say things when I need things, and he's trying to ask more often. And that's kind of our pattern. And I know other couples are different, but that's kind of some tools that we have come, and it's, I mean, it took a decade literally to get to that point.
Yeah.
A decade of being married.
And to any, I mean, because if I just from the outside, even for you to get to that realization, you have to first understand what it is that you do, what your part
Mm-hmm.
in it, and like what's
Yes.
happening inside of
Yeah.
you. That, whoa, this is a pattern that I've noticed. When this starts happening, I start feeling this way. And when I start feeling this way, eventually this happens. And then when this
Mm-hmm.
happens, then I relate to my partner and we have this certain fight. So like, even to
Yeah.
notice the pattern in the relationship, you have to learn
Yeah.
about all these patterns within yourself. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and then to just recognize the pattern is one thing, but then you've like also worked through a process of how you can, you know, uh, communicate with your partner, but then also
Mm-hmm.
even like for you personally, how you can operate from a state of being of, gratitude and joy and all that stuff is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. But like you said, man, look at all the time that it's sort of taken to
It
arrive
took
at
us a
those
long. Yeah.
answers.
Yeah.
And so I'm like really, well, it's just really cool to hear you say that, but also too, like as an encouragement to people out there are still who are still maybe not quite there, right? They're still in the process of like just getting frustrated and mad and blowing up, you know,
Yeah.
um, like to understand that if you're able to see your part and then
Mm-hmm.
see the pattern, that there is a predictable path you can go down to eventually arrive at a
Yeah.
place where like your those types of things are able to unify you instead of, you
Yeah.
know, but at the same time, when we're in a situation like this, like we don't often, when we're stressed, when we're tired, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to operate from the best in us.
Yeah.
So I think that like learning about yourself and your partner and your communication patterns
Mm-hmm.
and all these things are like great, but now, it's okay. I think if like now is not the time when you dive deeply like into those things because, we may not have quite the energy for that.
Well, I think one of the things that I told my mentor today when I was talking to her, because I was just saying, like I've lost 40 hours of work a week, so I don't know what I'm going to be able to get done or whatever. But one of the things I said to her is that things that work as a band-aid in a short term, like my go-to band-aid solutions for like when my kids have a school holiday, or somebody like Ansel had a pipe break at his school earlier this year. He had to come to work with me. So it's like the solutions I can use it for like a one day or a few hours are not the solutions that I can employ long term. Like sticking my kids in front of an iPad, like I can't just do that 40 hours a week. That doesn't work. So I kind of have to like make a new, for many reasons, one of which is that they get really grumpy if they're on that much. It's just not like, they just can't. And I'm not criticizing anybody who is doing that, but what I'm trying to say is for us in our family, it's like I have to realize too is that there's some things that in the long run are gonna, it's worth the sacrifice now, because it's like some of those short-term solutions are like a high interest loan. It's like, yeah, I get the payoff right now, but I'm gonna be paying I'm going to be paying the bill on that for a long, long time.
Wow.
And so if there are some things in your life that you can kind of identify that think, okay, these are the things that they're band-aids and they can work in these situations, but I can't use them because we end up we fight with each other, we're mad, and then none of us feel good, and then none of us are in a healthy space to operate. So it's like when we kind of get into a spot where we're like hunkering down and we're all kind of feeling the scarcity of time and we're on edge it's like that is when our family, we have to kind of double down and say, we're going to take care of ourselves. So we're going to try really hard to get sleep because we all treat each other better when we're sleeping. And for me, I need to move my body. Like I need to do some kind of exercise. Even if it doesn't seem like I don't have time for it, if I make that investment, even if it's just to go for a walk, it pays dividends. That's an investment, versus, the short-term loan. It pays dividends for longer. And so I have to kind of also, you did a great podcast on self-care. And so every person is different, but if you can kind of figure out those things that help regulate you and engaging in those, it helps with long-term with your partner, for me, with my partner, with my kids. Like I was really dysregulated yesterday. And in the past, my pattern would have been to feel really guilty because it was dinner time. And I would have felt like to be a good mom, I need to sit down and eat with my family. But I pull a few things together for dinner. And I told my husband, you eat with the kids and I'm going to go for a run. And I did. And I came back and I was so much happier and I was a much better mom to my kids. And I was a much better wife to my partner rather than giving into that nagging feeling of, oh, that's selfish of you to go on a run while he does dinner with the kids by himself. It's better for all of us.
That is real. Whoa, that's really powerful and really cool. That's really cool, Cheri. I haven't really thought about it quite like that in terms of investing in yourself, and investing in your relationship and stuff by doing the things that sometimes don't feel right or sometimes feel well, self-care can sometimes feel like that, right? Self-care is kind of a tricky thing, but yeah, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I think we've covered some really important, really helpful tips for people who are struggling right now. And like we said, everybody is struggling right now.
Yeah.
It's just with
we all are.
Yeah.
If there's ever a time to start thinking people are doing the best that they can, it's now. Because I really do think people really are doing the best that they can.
Yeah, perfect. I was just about to ask you if there's any last things you wanted to say, but that's it, Cheri. That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks again. And to everyone out there, I want to encourage you, keep doing the best you can. And if you're doing that, give yourself grace. And the areas where you feel guilty or you feel like you're not doing a good enough job, you're not doing what you should do the best you can to give yourself grace, to go easier on yourself, and to ask for help. That's all for today, though. Hopefully we'll be putting out some more episodes in the future. Thanks, guys. See you next time.